Imagine finding a wallet full of money in the middle of the street. What would you do? For many, the temptation would be great. After all, who could know? But what if I told you that this simple choice could change your entire life? That's exactly what happened to Kevin, a humble young boy, who, upon returning a wallet, without expecting anything in return, saw his life take an unimaginable turn. Now, you might be wondering, what could happen that was so surprising that the police would show up at your house the next day? What seemed like a simple act of honesty turned into something much bigger. And believe me, this story will captivate you until the last detail. What would you do if you knew that a single decision could completely transform your future? Kevin, just 13 years old, was about to discover that the simplest choices, made with humility and altruism, can trigger events that forever change the course of our lives. In this video, you will follow a journey of overcoming, inspiration, and, above all, how small gestures can generate great rewards. Get ready for a story that proves that good, when done from the heart, always comes back. And believe me, Kevin's reward was much greater than he could have imagined. Don't miss out on life-changing stories like Kevin's. Click subscribe now to join us on a journey where simple acts lead to extraordinary outcomes. Uncover how humble choices can create waves of change and bring unexpected rewards. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with inspiring tales that prove good deeds truly echo. Subscribe and let every story transform you. Kevin, a 13-year-old boy, was returning home after another day of school when, by chance, he found a wallet lying on the sidewalk. Upon seeing that lost object, the first thought that crossed his mind was the opportunity to get extra money for the school trip he dreamed of. It was a tempting situation. There, in that wallet, were notes that could make life easier for Kevin and his mother, who struggled every day to support the family. Overcoming is not just about overcoming big challenges, but also about small daily decisions. And it was at this simple crossroads that Kevin decided on something bigger. He could have ignored the values of humility and altruism that his mother had taught him. However, at that moment, he knew that the right thing to do would be to return the wallet to its true owner. With the weight of his wallet in hand, Kevin began to feel the drama of the choice he was about to make. He looked around, checking if anyone was watching him, but the streets were empty. Doubt struck again. Who would know if he kept that money? But what he knew, and what we should all remember, is that the greatest judges of our actions are our own conscience. Overcoming a moral dilemma is a life lesson we all face at some point, and Kevin was about to make the choice that would define who he truly was. Without hesitating for long, Kevin picked up his wallet and continued his walk, not home, but towards the address he found inside it. The name, Mr. Whitley, was engraved on a card along with the address. Kevin took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that decision transform into a sense of responsibility. The inspiration to do good, even when no one is looking, is something that accompanies us on all our journeys. It is often in these moments of upheaval that we prove our integrity. Kevin knew that his action, no matter how simple it seemed, had the power to change his life and the lives of others. Every step he took toward Mr. Whitley's house seemed to carry symbolism. It wasn't just a physical walk, but a character journey. The humility with which Kevin faced that moment, without expectations of rewards or praise, is what makes this type of attitude have such an impact. In today's world, where so many people are lost in search of quick gains, Kevin opted for altruism, showing that true overcoming lies in doing what is right, even when no one is watching. Arriving at the door of Mr. Whitley's stately home, Kevin looked up at the large iron gate and felt a shiver of anxiety. It was a house he had always heard about in the neighborhood, but had never gone near before. You heard stories, rumors that the man who lived there was rich, but lonely, and that he didn't really like visitors. This did not intimidate him, but it brought to light the responsibility for his decision. He knew that returning the wallet was the right thing to do. But would he be well received? Doubt permeated his mind, but Kevin knew that no matter how he was treated, he was doing the right thing. At many moments in life, we face choices that seem small, but which, in fact, carry much greater meaning. Kevin, at that moment, was learning what many people take years to understand, that true overcoming comes from within, and that the path of altruism may seem lonely, but it always brings immeasurable rewards. And it is precisely in these upheaval situations that real-life heroes are created, those who move forward without expecting anything in return, just driven by the desire to do good. As Kevin prepared to knock on the door, his heart was beating fast. What would he say? How would it be received? The internal drama he was experiencing was just the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. Many of us in similar situations might choose to ignore this opportunity to do good. But Kevin, driven by a strength he didn't even know he had, was about to teach a lesson not just to Mr. Whitley, but to everyone who crossed his path. So, with courage and determination, he rang the doorbell, hoping that his action would be received in the best way possible. Kevin's world was about to undergo an upheaval, and what he didn't yet know was that destiny had prepared something great to reward his humility and altruism. Sometimes life offers us unique opportunities to demonstrate who we are, and in that moment, Kevin was about to discover that kindness has a special way of returning to those who practice it. Kevin, as he approached Mr. Whitley's large house, felt his heart begin to beat faster. The house was immense, with high walls and an iron gate that seemed to protect much more than just the old man who lived there. Facing that imposing construction, Kevin found himself overcome by a mixture of anxiety and uncertainty. It was as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. After all, he was just a 13-year-old boy, and here he was, on the verge of confronting a man he didn't know, just for the altruism of returning his wallet. But despite the internal drama that consumed him, he knew he needed to continue. Overcoming sometimes means moving forward, even when fear tries to stop us. As he approached the gate, Kevin could feel the heavy silence around him, as if the world was on hold, awaiting his next action. He hesitated for a moment, thoughts running wild in his mind. What if he doesn't answer me? What if he thinks I stole his wallet? Will he listen to me? These questions tormented his mind, but something inside Kevin, an inspiration he didn't know where it came from, pushed him to move forward. Often, when we are about to face our greatest fears, it is at that very moment that we encounter a strength we never imagined we possessed. The gate creaked as Kevin pushed it, as if even the entrance was reluctant to allow him to advance. As I crossed the stone path that led to the main door, each step seemed heavier than the last. The turn of events he expected was not clear in his mind. He knew he was doing the right thing, but the uncertainty of how he would be received kept him tense. It is in moments like these that fear and overcoming intertwine, when the line between giving up and continuing becomes tenuous. Kevin, however, was determined. He knew that his action was driven by something greater than himself. Upon reaching the door, Kevin stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, and raised his hand to knock. The sound of his knuckles against solid wood echoed, but the silence that followed was deafening. The wait seemed endless, the drama growing by the second. He looked around, taking in the grandeur of the house, and wondering how anyone could live there alone. Perhaps it was Mr. Whitley's loneliness that made him so reclusive, or perhaps it was something more. But deep down, Kevin knew that regardless of the reception he received, he was about to learn an important lesson about courage and humility. As he waited for a response, Kevin couldn't help but think about his mother's words. She always told him that doing good was never in vain, even if people didn't recognize it immediately. This memory brought a sense of comfort. He was there not for a reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Often, overcoming fear comes not from eliminating uncertainty, but from accepting that the unknown is part of the journey. Kevin, despite being young, was already beginning to understand this truth. The door opened with a soft creak, and Kevin caught his breath. In front of him was a tall man, with a serious expression, with eyes that seemed to peer into his soul. It was the dreaded Mr. Whitley. Kevin's heart raced, but he held his ground, holding his wallet with shaking hands. "I found your wallet," he said, his voice weaker than he would have liked. Mr. Whitley watched him in silence, which made the drama of the moment intensify even more. Kevin could feel each second ticking by like minutes, but he knew he couldn't back away now. Mr. Whitley frowned, taking Kevin's wallet without saying a word. Kevin's fear grew, but he remained still, waiting for any reaction from the old man. The silence between them seemed endless, as if the world had stopped spinning for an instant. It was the kind of moment where overcoming fear became tangible, almost as if Kevin could physically feel the barrier he was breaking. He knew that this simple act of returning the wallet was not only a gesture of kindness, but also a test of his own courage. Finally, Mr. Whitley looked at Kevin with a look that was not one of suspicion, but of surprise. "Thank you," he said in a low, husky voice, as if it were difficult for him to express gratitude. Kevin relaxed a little, feeling the weight of tension begin to dissipate. Sometimes the biggest challenge is not the act itself, but waiting for the outcome. For Kevin, the real turnaround was just beginning. The fear he felt upon arriving at that house was now turning into something much greater. A lesson in the importance of following your heart, even in the face of uncertainty. Kevin couldn't believe his eyes. There before him was the mysterious Mr. Whitley, a man whose presence commanded respect but whose expression was difficult to read. The drama of the moment was almost palpable, and Kevin, with his hand still shaking, held the wallet he had found. The silence between them seemed endless, as if time had stopped. Mr. Whitley, with his serious and penetrating gaze, finally reached out for his wallet. Kevin watched as he checked his belongings, without saying a word. It was a tense situation, but Kevin's humility didn't allow him to expect anything in return. That simple act of handing over his wallet, something that to Kevin seemed like the obvious choice, was about to trigger an unexpected turn of events. Mr. Whitley, after checking the contents of his wallet, looked at Kevin, and for a brief moment, the boy was sure there was something different about that look. Maybe it was surprise, or perhaps a hint of admiration. "You gave this back to me," said the old man, his voice hoarse and deep. It wasn't a question, but an observation, as if he hadn't expected such altruism from someone so young. Kevin just nodded, shyly, feeling the weight of the moment. What Kevin didn't know was that that brief encounter would be the beginning of a profound change in his life. Mr. Whitley, although he seemed rigid and reclusive, began to notice something in this boy that he hadn't seen in people in a long time: integrity. "This means a lot to me," he said, with a tone that mixed gratitude and admiration. Kevin was silent, not knowing what to say. He hadn't done it to be praised, but hearing those words from the old man brought a sense of accomplishment. Overcoming her own doubts and fears was starting to turn into something bigger. As time passed and silence reigned, Kevin began to realize that behind that seemingly intimidating figure, there was more than met the eye. Mr. Whitley's humility was something veiled, hidden beneath layers of distrust accumulated over the years. Kevin felt there was something more to the man, something he still couldn't fully understand, but somehow it was beginning to reveal itself. The drama of the situation was unexpected. A meeting that began with distrust was about to turn into a life lesson for both. Mr. Whitley continued to stare at Kevin, but now with a less severe look. "You could have kept the money," he said suddenly, which made Kevin's heart race. He knew he could, but he hadn't even considered that option for a second. "My mom always taught me to do right," Kevin replied, his voice firm but full of humility. It was a simple truth, but loaded with meaning. Overcoming temptation and making the right choice is a lesson many adults still struggle to learn. But for Kevin, it was already part of who he was. With a slight nod, Mr. Whitley took a step back, as if he was sizing up that young man once again. The weight of the meeting still hung in the air, but something had changed. "Thanks, kid," he said, almost whispering, as if those words carried more emotional weight than he was used to handling. Kevin smiled, relieved. The tension of the moment had passed, but what remained was a connection he never could have predicted. That simple action of returning the wallet had opened the door to something much bigger, a possible friendship. What Kevin didn't know, however, was that Mr. Whitley, despite his apparent rigidity, was deeply touched by the boy's gesture. Behind that facade, there was a person who had already lost a lot in life and who, for some reason, had isolated himself from the world. That act of selflessness, simple as it seemed, brought Mr. Whitley a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. Kevin's humility, his courage in facing the situation, all of this began to resonate unexpectedly in the old man's heart. Kevin, in turn, felt a wave of relief when he realized that Mr. Whitley had not only accepted his wallet back, but also seemed genuinely touched by his action. Sometimes, it's the small gestures that generate the biggest comebacks. Upon leaving the house, Kevin realized that, although the meeting had been brief, something had changed. He didn't know exactly what, but he felt that Mr. Whitley wouldn't forget him anytime soon. Overcoming was not only in facing the fear of knocking on that door, but also in dealing with the uncertainty of how I would be received. As Kevin walked away, the wind blew gently, as if the world was reorganizing itself after that brief but meaningful encounter. He expected nothing in return, but the universe has its mysterious ways of rewarding those who act altruistically. Little did he know that that meeting would be just the first chapter of a story that would change his life forever. The day after meeting Mr. Whitley, Kevin couldn't imagine what was about to happen. He was at home, finishing organizing his things for another day of school, when he heard a knock on the door. His mother, with a slight air of curiosity, went to answer it. When he opened it, he found a police officer in an impeccable uniform, next to none other than Mr. Whitley. Kevin's heart raced, and the first thing that crossed his mind was, did I do something wrong? The twist that was about to come had not even hinted at him yet, but the drama of that unexpected visit was already beginning to unfold. The police officer, with a serious expression, asked about Kevin's presence, which made his mother visibly nervous. She looked at her son with a mix of concern and uncertainty. Did my son do something wrong? He asked, almost voiceless. Kevin, in turn, was still trying to understand what could have happened. It was then that, with a gentle gesture, Mr. Whitley stepped forward. He seemed less serious than the day before, but still, there was a gravity in the air. The old man then looked at Kevin, and with a slight smile said, I came here to thank you properly. The tension in the atmosphere began to dissipate, but no one was prepared for what came next. What Kevin didn't know was that Mr. Whitley had spent the night before reflecting on the boy's gesture. He, who had lived a reclusive and lonely life for so long, saw in Kevin a light of hope and altruism that he hadn't found in years. Moved by the boy's humility and integrity, he decided that just a simple thank you was not enough. The old man wanted to offer something more, something that could change Kevin's life forever. When he revealed his intention, the impact of his words reached everyone. I want to offer you a full scholarship, Kevin, from school to college. Kevin and his mother were stunned. It was as if the world had stopped for a second to process this turn of events. The surprise was so great that, for a moment, Kevin couldn't say a word. His mother, with tears in her eyes, hugged her son, unable to contain her emotion. Mr. Whitley's unexpected generosity was not common, and everyone there knew it. Kevin, who until then had never expected anything in return for his action, now found himself faced with an opportunity that would change his entire future. The humility with which he handled the situation only made it all the more inspiring. Mr. Whitley explained that the money wasn't just for Kevin's education. He wanted to ensure that the young man could dedicate himself fully to his studies, without having to worry about the costs that would normally come with a good education. You have immense potential, said the old man, and I don't want a lack of resources to stop you from achieving everything you deserve. Those words touched Kevin deeply. He had not only gained a chance to study at good schools, but also the trust of someone who believed in his potential. The drama of that moment, mixed with surprise, brought to the surface a mix of emotions that Kevin couldn't express in words. The overcoming that Kevin was about to face was no longer just about overcoming financial challenges, but also about living up to the trust he was given. The weight of that scholarship was far greater than anything he had ever faced. Now he had the responsibility to live up to the unexpected gift, to show that his integrity, his altruism, were worthy of this opportunity. For someone who had never expected this, Kevin now saw his life take a turn he never imagined possible. Kevin, still absorbing the impact of the news, looked at Mr. Whitley with gratitude in his eyes. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. The old man just smiled and nodded. You already thanked me, Kevin, with your act of kindness. Now, all I ask is that you continue to be that person of integrity and dedication. The lesson of humility that Mr. Whitley was imparting to Kevin was one that many only learn over time. Generosity was not just in the act of giving. but in the impact it would have on someone's life. News of the scholarship began to spread quickly through the neighborhood. Kevin, who had always been known for being a humble, hard-working kid, was now seen in a new light. People were talking about how his simple gesture of returning his wallet had resulted in something so great. But for Kevin, the most important thing was not the scholarship itself, but what it represented, a turnaround that came as a reward for choosing the path of honesty. He now understood that life has unexpected ways of rewarding us when we do good without expecting anything in return. As Mr. Whitley and the officer said goodbye, Kevin's mother hugged him again, emotional about everything that had happened. She knew that this was not just luck, but the result of the character she had helped mold in her son. Kevin, in turn, felt inspired, not just by receiving a scholarship, but by realizing that in a world that often values personal gain, altruism and humility could still bring significant rewards. And so, as the police officer and Mr. Whitley left, Kevin knew his life would never be the same. When the door closed and Mr. Whitley left, Kevin turned to his mother and saw her eyes filled with tears. But this time, they were tears of pride. She always knew that her son had a generous and honest heart, but seeing all of this turn into something so great moved her deeply. "I'm so proud of you, Kevin," she said, her voice breaking. The drama of the moment wasn't just about the scholarship, but about the recognition that Kevin had become the young man she always hoped he would be. That scene was much more than a twist in Kevin's fate. It was a reflection of the upbringing based on humility and altruism that his mother always taught. For Kevin, hearing those words from his mother was as meaningful as receiving the scholarship. Since he was little, he saw the effort she made to maintain the house and ensure that nothing was missing, even with all the difficulties. She always taught him that, regardless of the circumstances, one had to act with honesty and compassion. That moment represented more than just a compliment. It was the culmination of years of silent teachings and gestures of overcoming. The inspiration that Kevin felt at that moment came not only from the opportunity he had received, but from the certainty that he was repaying his mother's effort and sacrifice. His mother hugged him again, this time with more force, as if that gesture could convey everything she felt. "You've always been special, Kevin," she said, with a shy smile, still trying to hold back the tears. The pride she felt was deep, but it wasn't just related to the fact that her son had gotten a scholarship. The real reason for his pride was the decision Kevin had made to return the wallet, even when he could have used the money for his own needs. This choice, filled with humility and integrity, was what really made her feel like she had raised her son the right way. Sometimes, in the simplest moments, we find the most profound lessons. Kevin's mother knew that even without a scholarship, her son's character was a victory in itself. The drama they had experienced over the years, the financial difficulties and deprivations, now made sense. Every little challenge they faced together had shaped Kevin for that moment. And for her, the true reward was not what Mr. Whitley had offered, but the man Kevin was becoming. "Always remember who you are," she said, her tone soft but firm. "Life will offer you many twists and turns, but it is your humility that will guide you." Kevin, moved, nodded. He always knew his mother was his biggest inspiration. She never needed big speeches to teach what was right. His actions, his resilience in the face of adversity, were the examples that Kevin followed. Now, seeing the pride in her eyes, he felt that he had, in some way, repaid everything she had done for him. For many, the scholarship would be the culmination of the story, but for Kevin, that tight hug from his mother and the recognition of his values were the real prize. Overcoming difficulties was not just about gaining opportunities, but also about strengthening family ties. The emotion in the room was intense, but there was also a lightness in the air, a feeling that everything was somehow falling into place. Kevin and his mother knew the road ahead would still be full of challenges, but that moment was a powerful reminder that with integrity and humility, any obstacle could be overcome. They sat in the small living room, still processing what had happened. "I always believed you would do something great," her mother said, with a soft smile, "but I never imagined it would be so soon." The inspiration that Kevin felt at that moment motivated him to continue following the principles that had always guided his life. Looking at his mother, Kevin realized that, more than ever, he needed to honor that trust. Every choice he made, every challenge he faced, was an opportunity to prove to himself that he was on the right path. The drama they had experienced over the years, with moments of uncertainty and difficulties, now seemed to have been part of a bigger plan. Kevin didn't know what the future held, but he knew that with his mother by his side, he was ready for whatever twists and turns might come. Overcoming, after all, was not just about external achievements, but about keeping your heart pure and your feet on the ground. His mother, ever practical, wiped away her tears and began to talk about the future. Now that you have this opportunity, Kevin, the next step is to make the most of it. It won't be easy, but I know you have what it takes. Kevin smiled, inspired by her words. He knew that no matter what challenges came his way, he wouldn't be alone. Overcoming each obstacle would be done with humility, as she had always taught him. And so the boy, who once hesitated when faced with the temptation to keep the money in his wallet, now faced the future with determination and gratitude. Her mother's pride was not just in her words, but in every gesture, every smile, every look. Kevin knew that moment would forever be remembered, not as the day he received a scholarship, but as the day he saw, in his mother's eyes, a reflection of who he truly was. And so, with a heart full of gratitude, he prepared to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that, with his mother by his side, he would always find the right path. As the days went by, Kevin began to visit Mr. Whitley's house more frequently. What was once just a brief, formal interaction turned into something much more meaningful. The relationship between the old recluse and the humble boy blossomed slowly, like a plant that, with time and care, reveals its beauty. Kevin, still not fully understanding the impact of his action, felt that every conversation, every gesture, built a genuine friendship. The turning point in their lives was no longer just about the scholarship, but about the transformative power of human connection. As they got to know each other, the drama that initially surrounded them began to give way to understanding and mutual respect. During the first few meetings, Kevin helped with small tasks around the house. He mowed the lawn, organized papers, and occasionally listened to Mr. Whitley's stories about his youth. What Kevin didn't know was that these conversations were becoming the highlight of Mr. Whitley's week. The old man, who had isolated himself from the world for years, now found inspiration in Kevin's humility and curiosity. He saw in the boy an opportunity to share his memories and, perhaps, right the wrongs of the past. For Kevin, hearing those stories was a life lesson, a way of learning that overcoming does not always come from great achievements, but from the small gestures we make on a daily basis. Over time, Kevin's visits became more frequent, and Mr. Whitley's house, once silent and cold, now came alive. The sound of laughter echoed through the hallways as the two played chess or worked together in the garden. It was an unlikely friendship, but it worked so naturally that it seemed like they were destined to meet. Kevin felt a deep gratitude for being able to be a part of Mr. Whitley's life, and the old man, in turn, felt that the boy had brought back a joy he believed he had lost forever. Friendship, built on the foundation of humility and respect, was becoming an important pillar in both their lives. Every conversation was a learning opportunity. Kevin, always curious, asked questions about Mr. Whitley's life, the decisions he had made and the twists and turns he had faced. And in each response, Mr. Whitley shared not just stories, but lessons. He talked about how, at certain moments in life, overcoming is only possible when you have someone by your side to guide you. Kevin, who always believed that his mother was the only person who could teach him about life, now also found himself inspired by that man who, with all his experience, had found a new way of seeing the world. Mr. Whitley's garden, once forgotten, now flourished under Kevin's care. It was almost symbolic. Just like the friendship between the two, the plants grew and flourished with the necessary time and care. Mr. Whitley, who initially watched Kevin work from afar, soon began joining him, sharing gardening tips and even stories about how he and his late wife gardened together. For Kevin, these moments were more than just lessons about plants. They were moments of deep connection, where he learned about the importance of nurturing not only the earth, but also human relationships. Kevin couldn't help but feel inspired by Mr. Whitley's wisdom and patience. He saw in this man an example of resilience, someone who had been through so much, but still found the strength to open up to a new friendship. At the same time, Mr. Whitley was surprised by Kevin's maturity. The boy, although young, demonstrated a humility and an understanding of the world that few adults possessed. Together, they formed an unlikely but harmonious duo. Each meeting was a lesson, an exchange of experiences that enriched them mutually. The friendship between the two began to attract curious looks in the neighborhood. People talked about how the reclusive Mr. Whitley, who was rarely seen outside his home, now spent entire afternoons talking and laughing with Kevin. But for both of them, other people's opinions didn't matter. They had found something special, something that transcended differences in age and social status. Kevin felt more and more at ease in Mr. Whitley's presence, and the old man, in turn, became more open and warm every day. It was as if, together, they were overcoming the barriers that life had placed between them. As they worked in the garden together, Kevin began to share more about his own life. He talked about school, about his aspirations to one day go to college, and about how the scholarship had changed everything for him. Mr. Whitley, in turn, listened attentively, offering sage advice and encouragement. He saw in Kevin a reflection of himself when he was younger, full of ambitions, but without the resources necessary to realize them. Kevin's humility in recognizing the impact the scholarship had had on his life deeply touched the old man, who found himself inspired by the boy's determination to make the best of the opportunities he was given. Over time, Kevin and Mr. Whitley came to see each other not just as friends, but as family. The bond between them had grown so strong that it was no longer a matter of helping each other, but simply enjoying each other's company. Kevin, who never knew his grandfather, began to see Mr. Whitley as a father figure, someone who could guide him in times of doubt. And the old man, in turn, saw in Kevin the grandson he never had around. The turnaround in their lives had been greater than either of them could imagine, but they both knew that that friendship was the true gift they had received. As the months passed, Mr. Whitley's generosity left a deep mark on Kevin's life, but the real impact went far beyond the scholarship. The transformation in Kevin was not just in access to education, but in the change in his way of seeing the world and the people around him. He had learned that overcoming was not just about overcoming financial difficulties, but also about building bridges and genuine connections. Her friendship with Mr. Whitley, born from a simple gesture of honesty, blossomed into something much greater. Kevin now saw that his life had changed in ways he never could have predicted. Each new day brought new learning, and Kevin dedicated himself to his studies with renewed seriousness. He knew that the opportunity he had been given was rare, and that he could not waste it, but at the same time, he carried with him a humility that kept him focused on what really mattered. Even with the scholarship and the chances of a bright future, Kevin didn't let go of the life lessons he had learned from his mother and Mr. Whitley. He knew that true success lay in maintaining the essence of who he was, someone guided by integrity, altruism, and empathy. The friendship with Mr. Whitley also helped Kevin see the world in a different way. The advice he received from the old man, the stories he told, all helped to shape Kevin's vision of what it meant to have a lasting impact. Mr. Whitley, who had once lived isolated and closed off from the world, now found himself inspired by Kevin's youth and determination. He knew that his gesture of offering the scholarship had been important, but what really moved him was seeing how that action had transformed them both. It was a turn of events that few could have predicted. The friendship between a humble young man and a lonely old man, changing both their lives forever. Kevin, in turn, felt that the relationship with Mr. Whitley offered him a new perspective on what he could achieve in life. It wasn't just about academic or financial success. It was about leaving a legacy, about the impact he could have on the people around him. Inspired by this new vision, Kevin began to become more involved in the community. He organized small projects at school, helped his classmates with their difficulties, and, whenever possible, shared the life lessons he had learned. His own resilience was becoming an example for others, and he felt immense gratitude for being a source of inspiration. As Kevin grew and matured, his relationship with Mr. Whitley continued to evolve. The two spent hours talking about the future, about the dreams that Kevin had and the possibilities that now opened up before him. The old man, who had always been seen as distant and unapproachable, was now a constant and warm presence in the boy's life. Overcoming his own emotional barriers allowed Mr. Whitley to reconnect with the world, and Kevin, with his energy and humility, brought new vitality to the senior's life. It was as if they were both experiencing a second chance, rewriting their stories together. The impact of Mr. Whitley's generosity didn't stop with Kevin alone. The surrounding community began to notice changes in their behavior. The reclusive Mr. Whitley, who had previously avoided contact with his neighbors, was now often seen at Kevin's side, attending local events and even contributing to charitable initiatives. This turn of events in their lives became an example of how small gestures can have huge consequences. People began to ask themselves, if a simple act of returning a wallet can have such a profound impact, what else can we do to change someone's life? The true legacy Mr. Whitley would leave Kevin was not just his education, but the values he helped reinforce. Kevin knew that no matter where life took him, he would always carry with him the lessons he had learned. Overcoming, in its purest form, was not just about getting ahead in life, but about maintaining integrity and selflessness every step of the way. His friendship with Mr. Whitley had become a fundamental part of who he was, and Kevin knew that this connection would shape his choices for the rest of his life. Even with all the academic success Kevin began to achieve, he always made a point of going back to Mr. Whitley's house to spend time together. It was there, in the garden they cultivated together, that he found a sense of peace and purpose. The conversations they had were a constant reminder that life is not just about achievements, but about the impact we leave on those around us. Kevin, now more mature, saw that the true meaning of life was in the way we touch the lives of others. The drama and tension that initially surrounded his life gave way to a deep sense of purpose and gratitude. In the end, the biggest lesson Kevin learned from Mr. Whitley was the importance of being a person of integrity and humility, regardless of the circumstances. The turnaround in their lives was a powerful reminder that no matter how unexpected things may be, kindness and altruism always bring rewards that go beyond the material. For Kevin, his friendship with Mr. Whitley was the most valuable gift he could have received, and he knew that this connection would be something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Overcoming challenges was just part of the story. The lasting impact was on the friendship they had built. Now that you've followed this exciting story, the big question that remains is, what would you do if you were in Kevin's shoes? Often, opportunities for transformation come disguised as small gestures, and it is our choices that define the path we follow. Have you acted with the same level of integrity and altruism in your daily life? Think about it. Your actions today could be shaping your future in ways you can't even imagine. This story is more than just a lesson in personal overcoming. It's a reminder that the impact we make on the world starts with our simplest decisions. If you want a real change in your life, maybe it's time to review how you've been dealing with small situations. Have you taken advantage of every opportunity to do good? And if you want to continue learning more about inspiring stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each video brings a new lesson, a new angle on life that can help you grow and transform. After all, change begins with knowledge, and knowledge is at your fingertips, just a click away.